why MERAB Dvalishvili will neutralize Umar Nurmagomedov.
Undisputed UFC bantamweight champion of the world. Nobody calls out MERAB. Nobody calls out MERAB. There's a lot of respect there. There's even a fear there.
MERAB takes the crown. I mean, he is the king of pace in that division. I mean, with that pace, bro, if you don't knock him out in the first round, he's going to drown you.
You cannot prepare for an intangible like conditioning, and it's frightening if you're dealing with a guy who's learned to weaponize pace, and that's what MERAB has done.
Today, I'm the best fighter in the UFC, okay?
So here is Umar Nurmagomedov.
He is the cousin of the great Khabib Nurmagomedov, undefeated champion, Hall of Famer.
When you watch Umar, he's one of the most dynamic kickers in the sport.
I want to finish my career like Khabib, undefeated. I will beat anyone. I want to be part of this legacy. I want to be joined in this legacy.
Umar vs MERAB are set to face off at the co-main event at UFC 311, with a lot of people having their eyes set on this current matchup. As Umar and MERAB have some sort of a beef going back and forth, while also both of these guys being some of the top fighters and the most dominant fighters in the bantamweight division. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since making it to the UFC, MERAB Dvalishvili has looked to be one of the more impressive fighters at the bantamweight division. Although losing twice in his first few fights in the UFC, MERAB has done a tremendous job at just piling wins upon wins upon wins. And when you look at the current win streak he's on, it's obviously extremely impressive, but when you look at some of the guys that MERAB was able to beat, it's even more impressive, as he has wins over guys like Cody Stamann, Marlon Moraes, Jose Aldo, Peter Yan, Sean O'Malley, and also Henry Cejudo. And a lot of those fights and a lot of those guys that I mentioned he beat in pretty dominant fashion, as in his most recent fight against Sean O'Malley, it wasn't all that close either. So a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, how does MERAB do it? Because when you look throughout his win streak, he really doesn't have finishes on his record, at least against anybody of significance. So how is MERAB able to beat all these guys via decision so dominantly? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first and main factor that I want to touch upon is his overall cardio. Because when you watch MERAB out there, it's pretty clear that this guy definitely does have skill. On the feet, he's consistently getting better. Obviously, his wrestling is very, very good. But when you look at his overall game, the biggest thing that jumps out to you is his overall cardio. What MERAB does well out there is just outpaces all of his opponents. He just continues to shoot takedown after takedown. And really what that does is two separate things. The first thing is it stifles his opponent's offense, because if you have to consistently defend takedown after takedown, obviously you can't get your offense going, but also what it does is it tires out his opponents as well. And once the fight gets to the second, third, fourth, or fifth round, MERAB's opponents start to gas out pretty significantly, and it becomes easier and easier for MERAB to take down his opponents and start to dominate them more and more. And I think a perfect example of what MERAB does really well out there is his fight against Petr Yan. Because obviously when you look at Yan, he's been one of the better fighters at the bantamweight division for some time now. Obviously a UFC champ, and that division obviously has wins over a lot of very impressive guys and a very dangerous guy as well. But when you look at his fight against MERAB, it's pretty clear that MERAB was able to implement his game plan to perfection. MERAB consistently shot after shot after shot for 5 rounds. And obviously the insane cardio that MERAB had allowed him to continue to shoot over and over and over again. And obviously in that fight, it was very effective, as Yan wasn't able to get his offense going whatsoever, as he had to consistently defend against takedowns. And even though Yan Jan was defending a lot of those takedowns. Even when he was getting taken down, he was getting back up a lot of the time. At the end of the day, it didn't really matter because MERAB was doing what he wanted to do. Even if he wasn't able to take Jan down, he was able to pressure Jan enough to get his back to the cage, and he was able to shoot takedown after takedown and force Jan to be on the defense for the entirety of that fight. And that's really what MERAB does well out there: stifle his opponent's offense while also tiring out his opponents as well. And by the end of that fight, Jan was pretty tired. He was getting hit a little bit in the latter rounds of that fight, and at the end of the day, MERAB was able to get a 50-45 victory over one of the more dominant fighters in the bantamweight division, quite frankly. And obviously, it was an insanely impressive win. But the next factor for why I think MERAB has been able to be so dominant thus far in the bantamweight division is due to his coaches and due to his game planning. Because as I mentioned before, a lot of the times what MERAB does out there is utilize his pace and pressure in order to stifle his opponent's offense while also tiring out his opponents as well. And going into that title fight, that's exactly what Sean O'Malley thought. O'Malley thought he would be able to be on the back foot and find counter shots just like he was able to do against Aljamain Sterling. But obviously that fight was completely different, and MERAB had a completely different game plan. As MERAB was actually backing up the majority of that fight, he was either all the way in or all the way out. And a lot of times when MERAB was dancing around the cage, staying out of danger, it threw off Sean O'Malley quite a bit. As I just mentioned, Sean is more of a counter striker, and he isn't necessarily as effective at pressuring his opponents as he is at finding those counter shots. And MERAB knew that. And the fact that he was dancing around the cage, backing off for the majority of that fight, certainly threw off Sean O'Malley. And when there were opportunities, MERAB would shoot in for a takedown. Most of the time, he was able to get the takedown, hold Sean down a little bit. Sean was able to get back up. But once the fight got to the 4th and 5th rounds, Sean became very tired at that point, very sluggish with his potential counter shots that he was trying to throw, and he was being able to get taken down a lot easier. Now, obviously, at the very end of that fight, Sean did find a little success with those teep kicks as he was able to hurt MERAB to the body. But at the end of the day, MERAB was definitely able to win that fight, at least in my opinion, and he was able to do so quite convincingly. So in my opinion, as I mentioned, the two factors for why MERAB has been able to be so successful is due to his overall cardio and due to his overall game planning. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think MERAB Dvalishvili is going to be able to neutralize Umar Nurmagomedov? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor that I want to touch upon is his overall cardio. Because in all of his fights, that's the main thing that stands out, and I don't think there's going to be anything different in this fight against Umar. Because although Umar is definitely going to be one of the better or maybe even the best wrestlers that MERAB has faced, that hasn't stopped him in the past. Because when you look at MERAB's fight against Jose Aldo, he wasn't able to take him down, not even once. But regardless of that fact, he was still able to get the victory due to pressuring Aldo alongside the cage. Now, obviously that wasn't an exciting fight, it was a pretty boring fight actually to watch, but at the end of the day, even though MERAB wasn't able to take Aldo down, he still was able to find a victory. And I think we could possibly see somewhat of a similar thing in this fight against Umar Nurmagomedov. Because even if MERAB is having trouble getting takedowns on Umar, as long as he's pressuring Umar alongside the cage, and as long as he's shooting takedowns against Umar, it is putting Umar on the back foot and on the defensive. And in those situations, MERAB is still technically winning the fight at that point. Now, of course, if he is consistently shooting time in and time again, there is some things that MERAB needs to be worried about. He does need to be worried about counter shots, about knees, uppercuts, and stuff like that, while also needing to worry about potential reversals. If he does shoot in for a takedown lazily, Umar obviously is a very good wrestler, and he could potentially turn the position around and put MERAB on his back. But regardless of that fact, I do think MERAB is a good enough wrestler to get back up if he does get put on his back. It is also a lower weight class at 135, so it is a lot more difficult to hold guys down for a majority of the time. So at the end of the day, if MERAB continues with the game plan that he's used in most of his fights, I do think he is going to be able to be successful at stifling what Umar does well out there, while also being able to get the victory over Umar Nurmagomedov. But the next factor for why I think MERAB is going to be able to stifle a lot of what Umar does out there is due to the fact that Umar isn't necessarily a guy that has all too many finishes on his record, especially once the competition has increased. And I just feel MERAB is a guy who's essentially impossible to beat unless you finish him. And based upon the track record that Umar has shown, I'm not all that confident that he would be able to find the finish on MERAB. So overall, my official prediction for this matchup would be MERAB Dvalishvili by decision over Umar. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this matchup. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think MERAB is going to be able to get the job done over Umar, or do you think Umar is going to win this matchup? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.